Hi students, so this is phase 2 of your watercolor spiral. At this point you have a dry sheet of watercolor paper that you've done the first phase on. You want to let this dry thoroughly, and then we're going to use a few treatments on top, and at some point you'll end up with something like this. This is the exact example that I used for the diagram. Okay, so you'll be able to see that for the diagram. So, dry paper, completely dry. And to start with, I put some water on these just to get them started before filming. And I'm going to use a tiny little brush, and I'm going to use some saturated watercolor to add depth and vibrancy, color to at least one shape. So how about if I take the red one here, and I'm going to add some blue. Let's see, I'll add a little bit of red to it, and yeah. And so I'm going to just kind of play around with adding color on top of dry color. Sometimes we feel like you do watercolor and then you're done, but there are lots of steps that you can do on top of it to make it a little bit more vibrant. So I've got this. I'm going to try to do something very different from that. Let's add some brown. One thing I wanted to point out is that people often stay with the most saturated color instead in terms of not combined with other colors. But desaturating your color, having a variety of desaturated and saturated colors, is really going to make your colorful things a bit more vibrant. So it's going to make it more vibrant because it has something. I think I should explain that, because it has something to work against. Okay, so just play around. I'm using kind of a I'm using a very irregular kind of scumbling form. So that's what it looks like at this point, and just kind of play around with what you get. My example on this sheet, let's make sure that we can see it. I don't know if you can see it, but we'll see, is this right here. Okay, so I used some very irregular marks. The same color, no, I used a reddish, purple, and blue. Now the next thing we're going to use is to use a colored pencil, a few colored pencils. I've got my Prismacolor here, and I've also got my woodless colored pencils. So let's work on this one. And I'm going to add some colors that are different from the ones there, and also that highlight the ones there. So maybe I'll choose a red. I like to have them just kind of out so that I can choose lots of them. Green. If I have, and I'm going to use, for me, the scumbling method is kind of the easiest way to quickly add color and surface in a way that is irregular and that I don't have to think too much about. So you can add a bunch of stuff. If you add colors that are the opposite or complementary to other colors, then it'll give it a lot more depth. So I've got red there, and I'm going to put green as well. So the eyes will combine those two, and we'll talk about that when we talk about color theory just a little bit. I mean, color theory is not something that we go into in depth. I think it would have made more sense if I put the darker on the edge here. But anyway, play around with how you can achieve some interesting surfaces and just give some added depth to that watercolor. Okay, and the example on this one was right here. So next I mentioned using woodless colored pencils, and you can use either or. Some of you ended up with woodless colored pencils, and some of you ended up with the regular colored pencils. So I'm going to work right here. By now this is probably dry, so I don't need to worry about it too much. So maybe I'll go here, okay? Because I don't want to accidentally put my wrist on there. So I'm going to use a variety of greens and blues because, you know what, those are often my favorites. I just love greens and blues. The woodless colored pencils, these particular woodless colored pencils are not as vibrant as other colored pencils might be. So I've got some blue that I'm adding there and some green over here, and you can be very specific about how you make the lines and add the stuff. Maybe I'll put the darker things over here. See if it'll take any more. So remember, I'm holding this right down at the bottom, and it you can see that this is a little bit less vibrant than this one is. Just can't get the dark colors quite as dark. That's not a big deal, but just kind of play around. I like to practice making gradients and just kind of experiencing how that looks. It kind of stops me from coloring something in and accentuates. It encourages me, whenever I make a gradient, something from light to dark, it encourages me to experiment more with the material. That's why I do it. And I think that is it. So this one was, oops, got a little glare now. This one here was the one that I did with woodless colored pencils. Let me see if I can get rid of the glare. And so that's going to be that part, and then I'm going to do another video with the Sharpie art pen, adding that on top. And that'll be coming up next.